That's amazing. I need to.
Playing the United States ought to be a part of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court advantage. One is war powers. Trump is expanding executive overreach, zero self-restraint or check. Savage 122. Trump's second term is for muscular vision of presidential power, revive expansive understanding of the executive authority, left unaddressed new claims of constitutional power. President used executive order whose actions legitimacy, contesting leading for a fight. Trump invoked world of military commander-in-chief, borderline between for law enforcement and war powers, forbidden using troops for military operations rather than long return fights over executive power. Surface during first term law does not define circumstances the presidents may determine in order to this leaving of the unfettered discretion to law and duty powers of previous presidents adhere to norms of self-restraint. Emergency power should never be used to address long-standing problems, should be addressed through legislation calling Congress to curb presidential power. Trump put forward novel, substantively interpreted legal authorities sought to breach. Trump magnifies our impact and ensures war powers are existential. Slane 1A. Trump weakens power for organizations war on terror. Trump promised retribution at home and unilateral military action abroad with no transparency and take advantage of lack of legislative effect. More radical high stakes war powers reconciles both widespread authority for countering engaged in abuses and consumes strikes in the region. U.S. not legally have war presence, unilateral power, institutionalized greatness in the Constitution, long forgotten, lack of due process and accuracy, leaves civilians killed as America's joystick warriors battle all over the planet. Trump the landscape of Ukraine, Afghanistan, whose gods are Iran, Israel, Yemen, you know, and the billions and the real risk of all for spiraling out of control. Failure consumes the world plan, effectively constrains the executive without restricting sovereignty. Saul 22. Executive overreach detecting committee U.S. forces military actions, freedom and liberties. Executive too much power. Institutions reign in ICC and rule of law and central to freedom. See active done by rules are responsible, especially U.S. for cooperating with ICC, put incentive structured reign in lawless behaviors over which U.S. to I law and HR decisions about war to create a safeguard essential to and endless wars to subject power to law for atrocity crimes, atrocity, no excuse to shield policymakers, systematic crimes illegal in U.S. law, not codified parties who sign to the Rome Statute more likely to adopt atrocity laws, resulting in more domestic prosecution, effective institution prosecutors, top level officials more responsible for gross atrocity, very persons who need to be constrained, change calculation made by executive and initiating conflict restraint, drone strikes and repealed AUMS and military intervention, state building, torture, incompetence, intelligence sharing, assistance for investigators, judicial assistance, capacity building for domestic force, motive laws to reinforce U.S. commitment towards accountability to deter crimes in the future, and to commit these crimes is incompatible with basic principles of constitutional government, offensive to American founding, ratification ends a double standard that allows the U.S. to weaponize the international law against the global South while committing war crimes for 1919. After the global authority can enforce compliance, violation, and implementation left to the whims of nation states utilized by U.S. in IRA, the only way to salvage is more democratic global constitutional order. Congress and undermines ICC and denies that the U.S. Rome does not apply to it. Manifestation of power enforce exemption in the U.S. and project violence and mass atrocity violations of Rome and undermines the courts and U.S. governments instead of home for how other countries engage with the ICC. Strong statement that the most powerful countries above the law then release the ICC. The global legal regime has little to no legitimacy. Expansive presidential war powers that mesh the U.S. in military conflicts without congressional approval that causes great power competition and goes nuclear. Outright 22. U.S. forces launched a human air sites, UDSE, and actually military conflict never approved by Congress. Retake reign in the U.S. war making separate constitution war powers defy limitations result in secret war. DoD rarely informs Congress. Afghanistan and Egypt, Iraq, Nigeria, Somalia, Syria, Tunisia, undisclosed territory, Russia, China, Iran, and no longer way more likely unauthorized risk of escalation. Advantage 2 is credibility. Now is more critical than ever for the U.S. to reaffirm its commitment to human rights. Amnesty 120. Centering HR more important than ever in Trump's office, right from multilateral rights system and consistency on willingness to violate to respect law. An example to the world has second term growing inequality, rising authoritarian conflict, unchecked power, violence, and security, exacerbating HR violations, decision by Trump, poverty, conflict, impact of everyone, and future generations of global stability, predicate, and world leaders commitment to U.S. withdrawal vacuum, vital U.S. government working with hand in hand with the international community, absent ratification, human rights abuses go unchecked, and corruption state policies create the chance for norms to change. Rate 19. The purpose ICC deterrence without ratifying facility, massive HR abuses under protection, sovereign immunity, unlikely any U.S. citizen indicted by ICC's jurisdiction, predicated on complementarity, ratification, hold U.S. leaders to the same standard, U.S. requiring worse violating ratification, more pressing now than ever. The plan would signal U.S. global human rights commitment and strengthen the rule of law. HRW 20. If you agree sound really for war and violation of law essential to building respect for HR around the globe, signal U.S. is dedicated to justice no matter where. U.S. should join the Rome Statute with 103 members in commitment. No one accountable for missteps by U.S. admins, fundamentally flawed military commissions, holding all responsible and not reporting or promoting anyone responsible for these policies. Human rights solves disease and builds resilience to insulate nations from existential risk. OHCHR no date. Study crises appear devastating as conflict, pandemic effectively is shown in preventive power. HR product shape better responses to pandemic, public health emergency, broader impact, HR better outcomes, and beating immediate right, ensuring healthcare for everyone, focus on good sovereign United States to exercise power, bring cause response measures to max effectiveness and combating disease and minimize consequences, response to the global threat, avoid problem, position to build out better shortcomings, and HR fundamentally weakening global national response. Human rights are key. Other methods fail to address structural healthcare inequities. WHO 23. HR approach to health in countries to improve underlying determinants of health insurance legislation and health policies respecting advanced realization of HR show that proactive measures to comply with HR improve equality, build resilience, mainstreaming HR principles and standards across health emergency prep responses, non-discrimination, prioritizing equity, and address health disparities, ensuring people access info they need for sufficient empowering communities to engage in planning, decision-making, implementation, health at all levels, designing services for spending, regulation, non-state actors, NGOs, media, effect, right to health access to cutting edge, checking progressive realization, legally budget, use of max research and services for all norms to address barriers, required services, people-centered, indicator specific needs, quality, extensive underlying determinants of health, water, sanitation, pandemics, cause, extinction, die on this 21. Dangerous teacher through disease after planning the next pandemic workplace every strikes in the near future and threatening human rights unequivocally. Yes, billions of viruses capable of affecting vital organ shutdown civilization. Executing preventive measures for could reverse or delay adverse outcomes. Upholding human rights and increasing credibility solve the root cause of conflict and is necessary for resolution. Otherwise, future global conflicts and escalation are inevitable. OCSA no date. HR can prevent conflict rule by HR violations for causes. HR is preventive power. President's approach to sustainable peace countries for HR perspective. Less funded conflict framework for addressing issues between countries. So for early warning and action under peace. Conflict caused by grievances. HR inequalities. HR human tackle accountability, non-discrimination, and enriching trigger tackle early on, empower people to see redress pathways towards peace, incentivizing resolution norms, reporting, prevention, universally accepted rights, interventions before conflict, addressing structural factors apply to all conflicts and managed to address drivers of conflict before crisis. HR most powerful in conflict prevention when fulfilled in conflicts, often caused by violation. ESCR's name is simple political rights and people don't enjoy ESCR's risks and extortion violence increase on the framing. The standard is consistent with the Donaghy utilitarianism distinction outweighs under any framework. Number 15. Reducing nexus of interest is the most important. Though trillions upon trillions of future people will be given 0.001% weight, non-cosmic all other doesn't matter. Being causes of versions of jail and virtue ethics must be put in good fight. Strong reasons to reduce excess of risk. Even there are 90% sure they have reasons from moral uncertainty to reduce excess of risk. Pain and pleasure are intrinsically valuable. They are reasons for actions in and of themselves. Negatively 6. Everyone takes one of the pains, reason, practice, pleasure, pain, no value, space, 700 reasons not to put a hand on the hot stove. If reason makes any sense, not see false. Someone who's never motivated to reduce pain, we cannot, from an objective standpoint, withhold endorsement. The most direct subjective value, if there's no objective, you could overrule our subjective authority. I'm good for girls.
What is the plan scale over to broader human rights credibility?
Yeah, because it signals that we're holding ourselves to the same standard as the other, like over 100 countries that are
Okay, why is joining this specific treaty key?
Yeah, because the ICC specifically talks about how like prosecutes things like crimes against humanity and war crimes.
Again, there are multiple other treaties like the Geneva Convention, ISCR, all of those also establish human rights practices and say that, you know, war crimes should not be allowed. Why don't ratify those things?
Yeah, the HRW evidence is pretty clear on how other, like hundreds of other countries are already a member to the ICC and they see the US is sort of holding out.
Like abide by the Geneva Convention too, like what is the reason why this is?
Yeah, it's specific to ensuring accountability for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. All of our evidence is specific to how the ICC is uniquely key to create.
Human rights solve disease.
Yeah, the WHO 23 evidence talks about how centering human rights post-plan the United States would have to do that because they're held to that standard. It talks about it addresses things like accessibility, things like sanitation and protection for communities who don't have access to healthcare now. So being able to center human rights is key.
Your argument is like disease in one country spread globally.
Yeah.
Okay, in that scenario, I mean, how do you solve every other country that hasn't ratified the Rome Statute and a disease could just start there?
We would say that we need to prevent disease like in the United States,
Right,
because
but
as we've seen in
it
previous
just
pandemics,
spreads
it starts in one state.
Well, I understand, so like.
And also, we make a
China-
broader claim in the advantage that talks about how we're working with other countries to center human rights. We're a part of that conversation now. These other countries are party to the treaty. They're held to that standard of human rights.
Power
US doesn't.
advantage, to be clear, do you think military officials, you know, people who are overstepping the bounds of their authority post-plan, those people get prosecuted?
They could get prosecuted, and also it changes the calculations they make when they're initiating war or trying to intervene in other countries. So it's even
Right.
like it's not post-hoc war powers. Like
So they get prosecuted and then.
well, there's multiple things that our cards establish. It says that yes, prosecutions. It also talks about creating domestic laws to prevent war crimes. It also talks about how Congress has more to say in initiating war. Like Trump can't just go to war in any region he wants. It talks about how right now he's going to war in places that he's not legally allowed to.
Okay, where is he going to war?
Yeah, I guess we would say the card talks about the card talks about Iran, Israel, Yemen, Afghanistan.
Are we going to war in Iran? Where?
Or it talks about how like there's these different hotspots and Trump has like the means and the will to like go to war in those hotspots because he's unrestricted.
Why did he not initiate major wars his first term?
Yeah, well, we say that in his second term, it's uniquely bad because right now he has zero self-restraint. He doesn't need like a third term, so like he's literally unrestrained.
Okay. A, the overreach, sorry, war powers advantage, and then the credibility.
The United States should remove the immunity determination and publicly hear that it is to comply with all tenets of the Geneva Convention, CWC, BWC, and every treaty that relates to crimes, with the exception of the ICC, provide assistance in support of the ICC International and domestic justice efforts as a non-party against us to do the same bill, always on response to epidemic and assistance against the odds to respond to pandemic strictly, mechanisms for increasing the intention of the infectious disease system, health care system that handles the soul, maintaining such sort of necessary medical care fund and ancillary research, and all for diagnosis and medicines to fill the AMF, and require congressional approval before any bills for operations undertaking plain court sort of crimes, but allowing U.S. officials to be prosecuted plain 2 stalls overreach, and every step for escalation in plain 3 stalls human rights and credibility, the HRW evidences. As a non-party, we can still sue the ICC, which solves police force and facilities, criminal 21 that investments have enhanced responsibility for persons who need to retain responsibility always and penalties to change master, the ICC will efforts to prevent outbreaks of global hunger, they can handle surgical routine and separate system OMG for diagnosis and treatments, and vaccines. Plank 8 solves war powers. There's certain evidence is the quote. The AUMF provides Trump with the human power to initiate wars, which is powerful and necessary to reverses the sole evidence agrees. It says quote, we should repeal both of the AUMFs, which is also an all cost. In the case, that's the initiate probably a member of understanding because human parties to the wrong section of the International Criminal Court. Souls, and was consequences of the restitution gun stocks, address the system of extension on subject to resume court to approve of reinstitution, local publicity, and so it is the same role as the natural act of including and GH system of corporation, in addition to the purpose until the NCC becomes part of the Rome statute of the international court itself. These things already global services, but also remote services, the place becomes part of the trust and corporate institution policies. These are with this head effect at the Fed, the line and 6 this effect. If you corporate the Fed had authority agrees by extinction will cause 18, we facing on historic closer war with the causes flying, risks failures and years and causes flying. No one is so much of a main targets of lobbying negotiation possible upgrade and also industry unless we just system of course we the negotiation design of to address the promises in the Western region. The worst competes one all particular against immediate to United States for something US middle who we refer to the Fed not such should pass the CCJ pass the sovereign versions of region then insert Chair Kashi 412 ratification destroys systems with Congress. The time ICC as outrageous movements houses in the West no court of use of bystands. The government ICC is from another relevance of facility although it's like person that obliterates manufacturing system for manufacturing requirement. There's no reduction of Congress acts manufacturing fair circles. There's emergency numbers theater deterrence China extinction Florida consumer return of the visibility keeping. They can also remain part of the community servant of the weekend for our and sites. Investing in competitors at home next as a pen structure. Finally, Article 3 and the 6th Amendment QCG Massive Bill Constitution and Citizens Prosecution. And for also under Article 3 ban law, like Bill of Rights defendants are in await in person many years before judgment practices mock to the evidence and system of the rights of no witnesses and tribunal witnesses and trials to see constitutional guarantee of the canal. The appeals of RC appealable as non preservation during Article 3 and the 6th Amendment extinction hanging anything constitution applies to the constitution bars of and all of them high laws in the nuclear age and the nuclear age constitution safeguard human survival next off of the United States change to increase military presence is here the United States publicly announced the United States will not withdraw troops from Syria. Military presence remains now recent 24 years and increasing the Syria to an ice and military presence in Haitians. As for the press about Syria, the plan is to raise one presence remember cost that they will prosecute and charge American military presence to China for ICC. That was the alleged war about U.S. troops ICC with the G and had to ICC Swedish with the U.S. and Syria has to charge the U.S. military actions Swedish looking from intervening in Syria. Syrian military presence also ISIS resurgence Russian power and Turkish invasion Europa. The US will draw ISIS from probably ISIS will centralize operations in areas of with ISIS for ISIS withdrawal. The best is the US will draw encourage invasion Syria by Turkey should give with the Greeks with resistance to Syria because of stop letting ISIS with percent consolidation Syria undermining also imperial spirit withdrawing forces lost in resurgence designing the access to the nuclear select the British in the world of use of recent for Syria top forces in the world results ISIS continues with the same operations too power has a chilling effect on it goes in straight from the ICC try to settle on Egypt's future after the Russian view abolishing the symbols of the court into law for uses to have a chilling effect no one's for the defense of national security and stability must be protected to defend all single universities most internationals every not politically motivated investigation possible how to pursue non-parties that every discipline was used to ever something that can cause sort of sense of also depending on the pressure well must be recharged the US extinction of global steel separate which is very central goal better sort of reach system to the end and have only one kills on bomb cost unprecedented that has to be total usually infection and radiation causes global sort of numbers causes as if not to yourself will kill us complex most reading on class nuclear order set disarm NDCA American proposition is key extinction by 19 first to tell the US the national order security members of this and 40 evidence and zero versus how to happen most of the US wants to face one of the when also we're obviously US and strength to be celebrated somehow PRC is managed that stuff and she should strengthen and publicly affirm its alliance with Israel response on the brink of 24 last week and then when she just ICC wants to Russia started by the enemy about there's only one enemy about the public so much about the because ICC will represent such a money to the world's asking them and speaks to try to look at the international community that this will cement that Israel's turn right word and make any so hard to achieve it until people the ICC will actions rating words because ICC was not only to save lives with the heart and saves lives the US reassures Israel by criticizing and rejecting the jurisdiction of the ICC the plan is traceable 34
Intervening against central ICC, making some people hardcore actions illegitimate about how the US is not parting many of us which all completely introduced to their investigation inducing Hamas increased pressure making Israel isolated and procedures being isolated people propaganda against ICC, examination by issue evidence ratification is perceived as abandonment one abandonment one chapter 20 there's also been the US result for the world isolating no jurisdiction consider applies to any non-party state and also non-federal system legal manifestation concerned about reciprocity of the US become party of the Western American information from Federal in Washington which to argue to for Israel to principally Anderson and others in action had to be always special when the size of ICC said that others are considered so far that Washington views not seems important hard informed extinction the cause of 17 versus 40 is history is so unique to every organization using the pay most based on these considerations and Israel being constituted use the other side is also to invest in rights and local participation to make sexual relationship now the open retainer Trump says that's incredibly goes anyone right he said the words for the ICC is the offers all means decision for everyone who is in ban no to say that as a regional court jurisdiction checks prevented from 23 hours no requested for resistance for return that structure issues on this war show to prevent research of the legible remaining judges those choose rule of law over the law to Trump congressional oversight process extinction block is remarkable including what is that for person in the field authority for weapons for engagement for training institution and Asian European last use terrorism border security border security other checks and war powers equal 30% less than 30% population places to promotion license visa based on to participate to Congress those only such a persuade house and second they will change so checks on Trump and first term Swedish first report of neighbor public restraint but will start first checker still start students are in words not pull out any kinds of and become your police press by never retreat set up with the rest of it about she have cancelled address from the world it's not part of the human rights managed violations are globally never been known having anything even people from the motion by every power everything I love something else daily what's ever been so other words mission drugs purchases these weapons other than the words which is endless and every other treat that we have about obviously dumps and no impact to disease adult human control disease and inhibition therapies. I mean, my provision extinction levels on like what has reason for fluid and no therapy plan. It's somebody resistant to disease. These are obviously less than the hallucination or any disease. Large population divide. The most generous probability estimate 0.02% in the next century into Chevrolet. Instead of being 17 islands, solve also 19 independent. Also, ability separating from disease around technological populations, virulence, the body shape or 20 to health and allergy the ECG and evolution being missions ability the superiority pandemic to listen as making less advantage human rights makes conflict more likely and zero reason for it's also wasn't key of your signature. It's also the recently used when the president back in the human basis in more solution after some previous award and for conflict.
How does the plan bring power production?
New setting process that once we ratify the Rome Statute, it factors into military officials' decision making. So now
How do
we
we
know,
commit war crimes and crimes against humanity? Why is
Well,
things
so
like
the-
genocide
okay,
key to
two
the US
things.
power production?
like, I agree, it sounds very good theoretically. The point is that our evidence says two things. First is that they will prosecute the US for like any civilian death ever. So it's not just like if you commit a massive war crimes, it's these people are literally afraid to incur any military operation, even when necessary, because they're so afraid of being held accountable under international law. Second, our evidence is that court decisions are made behind closed doors. So even if objectively, a military official has not done anything bad, they think and they have the fear that they will be prosecuted for whatever they did, and they're reluctant to engage in power objection tactics.
The memorandum counterplan, what's the independent politics?
Okay.
I guess manufacturing collapse, what's the scenario for war?
Our evidence is that China and Russia and Iran are revisionist actors, so deterrence is necessary. It says that competitiveness in the manufacturing sector is the critical internal.
I guess like economic decline has happened before, like why is there?
Well, it's not about economic decline, it's about the manufacturing sector and
Okay,
not
like
military
decline in
assets.
production. Has happened
You're
before.
free to read evidence that says that. We don't think so because tax cuts have always been extended and things have always been cheap for companies.
Okay, I guess why does like US or I guess why does it get modeled globally if the US is like undemocratic?
It does. What are
The impact to the like constitution does not.
that just is violating the Constitution, causes war because it erodes the fundamental guarantees that govern the nation. But also definitely like concerning the war powers scenario. Because if Trump is no longer constrained by basic constitutional guarantees, it could take all human rights away, which also would turn this image.
Okay, the like call 12 evidence, or I guess like Does Israel first strike or like what's?
Yeah, one part is about first strike, the second just says that even if they don't first strike, they adopt a launch and warning posture, and that causes mishap.
I guess federalism wasn't good.
Two things. One, our evidence says that like polarization and lobbying at the federal level makes effective policies impossible, which prevents us from responding to things like wars and pandemics, everything you think is important. Second, it says it turns the case because corruption means that the government does anything necessary to fight the plan.
Memorandum
Yeah.
plan, I guess, what does like a memorandum look like?
It would be codified into domestic law, but it would not be binding.
Okay, like who does it?
It's states.
Okay. You didn't read the cyber thing, right? Yeah. The order is gonna be War Powers, HR cred, the TCJA, the federalism counterplan, the Syria, or the Syria decide, the memorandum counterplan, the Constitution decide, Israel decide, the advantage counterplan. I'll like sign both.
I think that would be fine.
Okay. Once I'm going to say no durable field solve anything else means that we will lose to rollback or circumvention, and we feel that we adopt the current statutes of the ICC. Checks don't prevent it. Our cards talk about how Trump has zero self-restraint, how Congress is failing to hold back Trump now. Congressional oversight does not cause extinction, and there's no reason why executive overreach, conducting secret wars, or conducting things like war crimes are key to be able to prevent extinction. We say that right now, executive overreach leads to endless wars, which do not have any impact defense on the souls card crossfly from above. How Congress is not sufficient right now. And also our evidence postdates the Hirsch evidence that talks about Trump has zero self-restraint in his second term on the human rights advantage. It says that violations are inevitable. We're able to solve this. This is unique. We're able to solve this through joining the ICC, because it shows that we are committed to being credible. It says no disease, and a group with no disease impact. It assumes things like sanitation and vaccines, but we say that doesn't exist without the absence of the plan. On the TCGA, no privacy impact by 20 world remaining people, while U.S. health forces suspend unrelated disabilities, use of payment in places had not extend, use overestimating unimportance of dependency of institutions, abolishing norms supposed to disappear in the world, continue cases no matter what, in pursuit of hedge locks and overstretching Russia, China, access COVID-19. U.S. positioning itself within Russia and China, and certainly President Trump, Beijing, Moscow, and China, balancing coalition, economic interaction, and military ties. U.S. can on energy on every adversary to mobilize for dominance and risk escalation of respective country, and mobilizing the pursuit of hedge and competition, splitting American resources and time reduced investment in infrastructure and education, damage foundations in competition, market competition, federalism, counterplan, from new wealth, inserted. I can send it after if I did insert it. And can't swallow Trump when given to the United States Title 24. Trump and try to kill California, Trump is threatening to freeze disaster relief commissions requirements, market credit requirements, federalism, roots, pandemic preparedness, Title 21, federalism practice in the United States, ridiculous to our health and human rights, death rate in the U.S. is ranked fifth among the world's largest nation. America suffered with COVID-19 because the decentralized system of federalism simply failed to rise to the challenge. Market credit challenge to Syria. Stopping contradictory conditional conflicts or voting issues, turns the after acting only recourse against NASA want to take the spread out the move the after ultimatum and vote after deterrence, and the U.S. has already been on and off with their involvement in Syria. Simon 21. Trump argues for opposed to Assad, and Trump wanting to use troops out, including English and treaty outweighed were used to set the side market card aside, and the ICC doesn't curb U.S. power projection 1722. Who's more likely to investigate cases against U.S. and any other country that are arguing for unfairly impeding military problematic because no ICC bias and does not connect between likelihood of ICC investigation, for instance, of U.S. troops allegation ICC disproportionately targeting unfounded ICC, fully intended to drinking war crimes and providing justice, market credit justice, no new terror, middle 23. There's desire to join atomic the risk is low, effort required to scarcely likely be successful, highly improbable in the world being atomic here, so the control by like the nuclear state will not be able to control its use, and the weapon source might be discovered another use to disorder. Listen, nuclear trade exists in a very costly series of hurdles intending especially for recruitment, market power recruitment, remember, and the counterplan pretty comments where the can be done and can't solve on time frame. Trump is on the brink right now. Don't let the tuner tell you that the counterplan is able to solve fast and only hard law proposal solve 17. Initiative to regulate weapons can also see that the design is according to the reality of the theory of solve all issues may give rise to appearance of progress and neutrally little do not assist states in conveying credible commitments, market credit commitments, the Constitution, decide on any nuclear arms respecting the Constitution now, and considered a bunch of when I see evidence of how we boost the Constitution, we are more in line with the Constitution post-plan, post-plan that Israel decide. If any ICC is worse, it collapses human rights and checks and war powers and outweighs on scope, no perceived abandonment, use of standing billions in aid, inserted chart, and God check that this outlaws you assume that the we started World War based on potential abandonment, and no Israeli first strike bears 15. If Americans assume Iran will become military nuclear, Iran will likely use nuclear forces in Iran first strike against Israel, and Iran uses nuclear forces likely to be irrational in absence of any of these, especially retaliatory causes would be possibly received the benefits, market credit benefits now on the advantage counterclaim, permitting both and domestic rights can't solve global credibility, only joining the SEC signals that we're willing to submit ourselves to adopting laws. It also can't solve the war powers advantage, only being legally ratified onto the treaty and increases domestic prosecution laws. They have not read any evidence to substantiate the claims that plank 1 or 2 solves the war powers, so you shouldn't believe it. Yes.
And for the first few things you said on advantage counterplan, you said doesn't solve the powers.
Yeah, I said curb do both, and then like domestic stuff can solve global credibility. Yeah, for tax cuts, I marked the second card at competition. Foundations for competition, and then what other?
Sorry, I have 3 minutes. Actually, sorry, this one is. Israel, area that advantage and advantage one war powers, advantage three.
Because just like the.
Sorry, let me send the cards for this next. Israel lashed out to side, the Syria side, the advantage one more powers, advantage two.
The Immaculate text 4 times, which authorities manufacturing and process determining now it is good. 1. Empirics and basic leadership, but the U.S. leadership proves 2. Traditional work of the 18, the 60 of Russia 12, and then it has to be for the simple language, possibly worse than extensions of U.S. and these running close to the wars. It's very increases the overall U.S. military countries within the liberal order. 3. Multipolarity is bad because it's accent to war. Abraham 21 multipolarity in NDCA. Isolation between war states are always on editing worst cases. 4. Germany is good and so ends proliferation. Abraham 21 and we're seeing which never really had COVID on cruise adventure. Although it's not as well as world potential amongst nationalism, proliferation, great power, rights, 2100, Protestant in Europe and Asian Quebec, and Poland, Russian politics, best matters in nations, China, and civil political powers in the US, both parties under his interests, and race, North and Asian, SY, also the power of 5, pursuit, and equal rights, and analysis, of course, and Asian investment levels, to superior, the US, and analysis, documents of the US, also including uncertainty and miscalculation. That was evidence is the net card. Germany is good and ends global comments is what are those setting global peace why had to be by the US use for the civil and possibly the Department of US wants to see reason for has been reached. If leaders lose confidence in the US message, US will test the near peace now. And no unsustainability warrant that was actually read, but American leadership is good and sustainable hard to be by Congo. It's not for how and it's hard to use us. It's not for how it isn't. It's not for back in the probably 75 in Germany. You can't let the temporary die out of American North America. However, this is not take on uniqueness because they brought that manufacturing is a critical instrument and tax cuts are created for businesses to make investments as well as invest in new military assets and technologies. It's critical to secure dominance against China. They also dropped the card from the power production business. China is revisionist and will pounce on perceived deterrence for events to overturn the liberal order, which prevents us from responding to every threat to China. Will not care about those things, drops plus things like pandemics, terrorism, and inequality, which always sees straight terms every scenario. Also, retrenchment means ending U.S. military parent and allows them to prevent U.S. would reduce its possibility of increasing U.S. military withdrawal. Choose that classes extinction 1. Israel will be centered on the other page below, but 2. Saudi Arabia, same party, the Israel Saudi Arabia, really was not put in by pursuing the new terms with the Russian months of extinctions for instance 20 Saudi, the other one is followed Japan, Taiwan, Vietnam, Taiwan, get a range of regime bar, support the global leader, two parties, unleashed the Swedish Twitch, no overstretch, it is solved by the DSAB because they dropped that tax cuts and manufacturing and higher manufacturing capacity is sufficient to check every adversary or evidence especially this Iran, Russia, North Korea, and China by name, which means that there's no overstretch warrant in the card. This marks way too early now to say no to our cards. 1. Arbitrariness under 2 rules. A worsen on all of mixed speed half of that. It's a super simple matter of reasonable negative sweeping of hard. 2. Quality of debates more customer. There's also more nuanced debates. 3. Negative fairness. The interpretation forces of the head against every possible winner and sets, including interested new headlines like smart like aliens and Boston bots, which is nonsense. 4. Also distribution census through models of debate. These either all 2 in our cards or no 2 in our cards to the amount we read. And this specific 2 in our long by responsibility of the winner. And 20 to read cards we should have the winner 2 in our 6 use reasonably and think process to spread. Appeals afterness 1 views and avoidance the procedural C and 1 says and 2 negative fairness that way because every percent on this topic is fake, all lack the uniqueness and they speak person less and send the terms of the debate, which means that it's a certain influence impacting uniqueness now. The Israel election is that actually Yeah, okay, skip that, concede plan does not cause Israeli first strike, and no Israeli first strike anyway, so there's no straight turn, and concede no impact to terror or power protection, but the plan does not, for power protection does not apply to this set specifically, because they conceded a separate internally by why tax cuts are key, and the plan would derail those things, so even if ratification alone does not result in our military being degraded, then the plan does, because it provides passenger tax cuts. Now the Syria just said no violation, we didn't read 200 planes, both planes say that we should support Syria and keep presence there, it's obviously justified by the night, plus arguments and arbitrariness for above quality basis for multiple angles, testing, and refinement and innovation problems encourage arguments for assurance research, diminishing margin utility, excuse, Knuckle was explained above, and it's not a reason to reject the change. Now, the advantage camera. Dubois fails at least Texas because it conceded the plan specifically is unpopular, and European fights in commerce now does not solve global poverty is a joke. They draw the planes that solve the terminal impact to it. Fiat increase deployment of vaccines always on healthcare systems and disease management systems that can handle surges and check outbreaks instead of medical health. Remember, on the case, they said that vaccines, things like access to healthcare are the critical terminals solving, which the plan Fiat, which definitely solves the impact to human rights poverty, even if not the internal link does not solve global powers, is a joke, not read evidence. It's really funny because we got both of their want to see cars say that the AUMF is what allows Trump to unilaterally expand the executive authority, and the Counterfund necessarily repeal both of those. You've also dropped from 20, and these are all causes to the case, which means that only the Counterfund can solve. Now the first advantage, the plan cannot solve, which was explained above. There's no war powers impacts anyways. One checks exist. Saying that Congress is not checked is not sufficient. The development evidence is not about Congress, but the Supreme Court says that all Trump policies are met with quote strong legal resistance, and the Supreme Court has publicly said that it was checking, so any policy that constitute overreach would be struck down. Two, advisors check the equitable evidence. It's in 2024, it says that Trump's advisors are rational and check proper policies. Congress also has power over him, so it spans more powers are literally impossible. Three, empirically, their evidence is theoretical, but ours describes Trump in practice. His first term experience any impact from the heat, increased alliances and turns, while not starting any war. So even if they win that, they solve war powers, and war powers are standing down. There's simply no impact to that because Trump, in fact, was not one. The harm of the U.S. economy or his popularity ratings also cannot solve. Trump will actually, Trump will say no. He would not comply with the court ruling, tell him what he should or should not do. The most evidence is that he'll use the ASPN to justify using quote all means necessary to set free any American who's detained. Now the human rights advantage violations are found. Saying that this is after because it's wrong, because even if they were so used to one treaty, there are thousands of other principles on the books they did not restore, and it disproves the impact of human rights for a job that the U.S. was. Quote, every principle of international on a daily basis engaging torture, drone attacks, assassination, regime change, and more. Also, they cannot solve process. Embarrassing. There's dozens of other treaties that also regulate the same things that the country's not ratified. So it alone is insufficient. Grouping disease, defense fails, adoptive bureaus, and probably fairness diseases are rare and become less virulent as time goes on. And if it's incredibly lethal, then it will kill people before it can spread. Also, drop the islands check. It's not just vaccines. Drop that Australia and New Zealand can become isolate itself. Sufficient islands that more humans can repopulate, and our evidence says that the immune system structurally solves. There's only risk. How good is that?
Ordered, war powers, HR, advantage content. Not made the decide one time frame Trump can escalate a nuclear conflict. The click of a button, absent the plan, and any sort of executive war powers gives him the unchecked power to initiate war, whereas there's still checks on conflicts between China, Russia, and the U.S. right now, magnitude and escalates tension with China, Russia, Iran, and staggering array of other nations that are impact card delineates and undisclosed targets. Makes every region in the world a hotspot for war. They don't access as many regions of the planet. You put magnitude first. We both agree that extinction matters most. They've not extended a reason why China and Russia causes extinction. We have warrants that say that it causes endless conflicts in every region of the war because Trump can go to war in areas where he's not legally allowed to. It also turns the case war powers and meshes the US in endless conflicts, which means that we stretch things that signals to Russia and China that we have no capabilities, which is the same interlink to their manufacturing impact, which means that we turn to this side. They not make a claim that this side turns the case in the two and are on the war powers advantage. They say that there's checks on Trump, like the Supreme Court and advisors for on advisors. Trump does not carry, and says that he has zero self-restraint or check. The Supreme Court said we should crossify all the stuff from the Constitution, decide that they conceded, which proves how right now the plan is sort of leaving the Supreme Court and the Constitution, but sort of leaving the Supreme Court and the Constitution, means that Trump is not listening to these bodies. How right now he is uniquely wants to go to war, and he is conducting things like war crimes. They say that so that means that we're able to solve all of war power because there's no check on Trump. They dropped the savage 122 evidence, which means that second term he is sort of a muscular vision of presidential power. None of their evidence is in the context of Trump's second term in office. They say that empirically it doesn't matter because Trump in his second term is uniquely more unrestrained on the HR advantage. We're not going to go for it. We can see that there's no extinction from disease. All this stuff about the IC credibility was not applied to the solvency of the first advantage. On the advantage kind of plan, extend the solvency deficit. Lack of formal legal ratification does not stop Trump. Trump is not restrained. Only having the legal restraint from being a member of the ICC would be enough to curb his intervention, war crimes, and desire for war. The only plank they extended for war powers was the AUMS stuff. If they're inflating this one plank, we can still intervene in countries and conduct war crimes and go to war. Even if there's a repeal of AUMS, they conceded the fact that they conceded the warrant in the one area that talks about only the ICC increases domestic prosecution laws and holds leaders accountable. Even so, it's the perception that Trump will be held to these standards that scares him and prevents him from going to war in these regions. On the tax cut, they said we're not going to go for hedge bad. We're going to go for the fat way. Evidence. They read this piece of evidence from 2019, but ours posted there's by again. It says there's no privacy impact. It says that the world remains equally peaceful when the U.S. cut forces and spending, which is their internal link to manufacturing. It says that stability exists in places where the U.S. does not extend, which proves how the U.S. is overestimating their own importance, which means that there's no impact to low hegemony. But you know that war powers cause extinction because we can go into endless regions and cause war, which means that there's no terminal impact to the decide because the U.S. is not key to having peace in other countries. It's empirically proven. Good debate.